from CLO Symposium in Houston, Texas. The session is called A Blueprint for Success, How to Build Your Learning Technology Stack. I'm Pam Boris, Learning Advisor at Training Orchestra, and we're a Spotlight sponsor at CLO Symposium. This is an exciting topic that's getting a lot of attention in the L&D industry, and we hope this session will provide some useful information that you can use in your own organization when thinking about building your own learning technology stack. So as far as the things we're going to cover today, what is a learning tech stack, some of the current trends that are driving this need, a couple of learning tech stack models to give you some ideas, some reasons to adopt this approach, the specific need to support ILT with your learning tech stack, 3 pitfalls to avoid, and then a solution and a case study example just to wrap things up. So let's start with what is a tech stack. So this concept comes out of software development. And it refers to the set of technologies, software, and tools that are used in the development of sites, apps, and technology products. And we can use an example from the marketing discipline. And this may be something we can all relate to as consumer buyers or B2B buyers. We know that marketers have many, many systems behind the scenes tracking our user behavior, the emails that we open, the social media that we click. And we know that all of that is informing what they know about us and our buyer journey. And each technology has its own unique specialty in that marketing tech stack and replies into and intersects with the CRM system or maybe a marketing automation system. And the beauty of a marketing tech stack for marketers is they can very easily plug and play the pieces that they need based on the type of marketing programs that they're doing. So we know why marketers need a tech stack. But why does L&D increasingly need the power of a tech stack to manage and deliver learning? Now, we know it's no secret that it's an unprecedented time of change and innovation in L&D. And I'm just sharing a few research points from an organization called the Fosway Group, which is an expert analyst research firm out of the UK specifically, and they focus on the learning and HR markets. And they found that there were 3 broad categories of learning platforms. The first, established and mainstream platforms. And this would include LMSs and authoring systems. And 60% of organizations have one or more of these type of mainstream solutions. The second is niche and emerging solutions. And these are things that are supporting mobile learning, social learning, virtual classrooms, and about 1/3 to 2/3 of organizations are using something in that bucket. And then at the kind of on the edge here, specialists in exploring, where about 1/3 of organizations have a platform. That might be your MOOCs or some AR and VR applications. So this is not a progression, it's really a portfolio. It's not like you evolve from your LMS to these other platforms. You really need all of these to complement the old and augment the system. One technology just cannot do it all. Things are changing too fast. There's too many different things you're trying to support. And it's increasingly an ecosystem. You hear a lot about an ecosystem approach, very similar to the learning tech stack. And each is focused, but interacts and is integrated with each other. Also influencing the learning tech stack is all the changes that's happening in digital learning. Organizations are looking to their learning platforms to drive learner engagement, to support mobile learning, collaborative learning, manage analytics. It's a lot. And the types of content being used are more varied than ever before and largely driven by video, mobile-friendly content, blended learning, and increasingly user-generated content, which is also growing in use. So all this is leading to an approach where the LMS is no longer the be-all, end-all to deliver, track, and manage learning. The learning tech stack approach is increasingly needed in order to meet all of these demands. So let's talk through a couple of examples of learning tech stack models. The first that I'm going to share with you is from the folks at Burson by Deloitte. It was authored by Josh Burson, which many of us know. And he calls them learning tech segments. And that's a good way to think about it because there are many different types of systems and they don't always stack nice and neat. And it depends on your corporate strategy, your L&D goals, and your existing systems. So in Josh's model, he starts at the top with the learning experience platforms. And this would include organizations, companies like Degreed and EdCast, as well as the program delivery platforms, and that might include some of the MOOC platforms, and also micro-learning platforms. And then in the middle layer, he represents the various content authoring and assessment tools, and as well as off-the-shelf libraries of learning content. And then finally, he has the LMS platforms, the learning record store at the kind of the bottom of the structure in boxes 6 and 7. Now, a second model that I want to share with you, which is another graphical depiction of the learning ecosystem. And while this is a slightly busy graphic, I think it captures both the complexity and the nuances of the learning tech stack needed to support today's complex learning initiatives. Now, this is a graphic we've developed here at Training Orchestra, and it resonates with the learning practitioners we speak to, the CLOs, the analysts. So it's one that I think is increasingly being adopted. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up, because this tech stack flows from the back office, admin-facing tools up to the learner-focused layer. And the foundational technologies in that bottom part of the stack are training resource management systems, assessment systems, learning analytics, LRS, all the things that underpin your whole stack. The middle layers are training resources and delivery systems, and that includes the traditional LMSs, but also the content providers, specialty functionality like virtual classrooms. And in this model, the LMS is really more of a middleware layer, if you will, and it's doing learning management, not learner engagement. And then finally, we reach the top, the learner experience level. And hopefully, and whether that is a specific learning experience platform, or maybe your SharePoint site or some other website, hopefully our learners can just interact with this beautiful, intuitive top layer and not have to even think about all the complexity that falls below it. Ideally, that's definitely an ideal state. And when I think about these two models, they're both valid. But the second model, I think, is fundamentally different in that it focuses on building a secure foundation. We know foundations matter. Your foundation, in the case of a learning system, is those back office systems that underpin the whole stack. Just like the foundation on your house is critical, if a hurricane comes through, you want to be sure that your foundation is definitely solid. Just to take the analogy a little bit further, there's no point worrying about the drapes on the windows if your foundation is not there to underpin the whole stack. So how do you know if your programs are working? This is one of the key areas that you think about with these underlying foundational technologies. You can't answer that with your learning content. You can't answer that with your learning experience platforms. You can really only answer that with those foundational technologies like training resource management, learning record store, and assessment. So if you're asking yourself questions like if your learning programs are having an impact, where to focus your time and budget, and how to make training more effective, all those questions lead to the need to secure your learning foundation, because you need to be collecting the data to answer those questions. You cannot answer those questions in a vacuum. And just to share a couple of equations, I think that the typical ROI, and of course we talk a lot about ROI in this industry, is the cost of the old training minus the cost of the new training, and then in the denominator is the cost of training. But that's really not the right ROI picture, right? It's really a little more complex than that, which is the bottom equation, right? Which is the benefit of the new training minus the cost of the new training. And then you subtract from that the benefit of the old training minus the cost of the old training, and then put that over the cost of training. And that gives you a much more accurate version of an ROI, and one that just increasingly makes more sense. And particularly if you're thinking about instructor-led training, right? There is a lot of organizations, instructor-led training is 50% of the budget. It's typically very expensive to run. So if you can be looking to optimize using some of your learning technologies, that feeds into that ROI equation. And when we think about cost factors, often that first equation that I showed you is the only one that organizations look to when managing classroom training costs. Only 70% of organizations implement online learning to reduce training costs specifically. Only 20% are trying to actually improve the training. But you don't want to lose sight of the fact that classroom training is very effective. It's highly engaging. There are certain topics that just lend themselves better to that classroom environment. It's very social. So while the conventional wisdom is the only way to save cost on classroom training is to move everything to e-learning, really you can optimize to innovate. You can optimize your classroom training in order to make it the most efficient use of your budget. And when we think about instructor-led training, it is increasingly more complex than e-learning. It requires the scheduling of resources and instructors and classrooms and equipment, and all of that stuff needs to be managed by a software systems. And while LMSs are really good at managing e-learning and learners, they're not so good at managing this type of classroom training and all the resources that are required. So let's talk about some pitfalls to avoid when thinking about a learning tech stack approach. The first pitfall you want to avoid, you want to not do this, is ignoring your learning technology foundation. Too often when people are talking about learning tech stacks, they get really excited about the shiny objects, the new learning experience layers, the new cool types of training content and modalities. But if you don't have training resource management to manage the budget, track the budget, work on the forecasting, and handle all of those scheduling challenges, you're missing a key piece of your learning technology foundation. Similarly with evaluation, if you're missing evaluation, you could create content and run programs, but if you have no idea if it's actually working or what success looks like, you're going to struggle to report that. The second pitfall to avoid is over-reliance on your LMS. And most organizations have an LMS in place, and as we talked about earlier, LMSs are no longer the be-all, end-all for managing your program. Now, organizations' satisfaction levels with their LMSs vary widely, but there are typically sort of 4 categories of functionality within LMSs, which are the cause of dissatisfaction among LMS customers. The first is audiences. Can you reach all the audiences you need to? LMSs, for the most part, are very good at reaching knowledge workers, people who have a mobile device or a laptop on their desk. They don't do a particularly good job of reaching technical workers, shop floor workers, people in certain geographies, and your extended enterprise needs of clients, partners, and suppliers. The second is around delivery, the different types. LMSs were really optimized for delivering e-learning content. They're not so good at delivering or tracking informal learning. Some have gotten better about mobile, but that's still a challenge. And certainly instructor-led training is not well supported in LMSs. You might be able to see your instructor-led training courses in there, but not the management of them on the back end. The experience, and there's been a lot of talk about this, and the LMSs are desperately trying to catch up, but the ease of use, the social and collaborative, really making a consumerized experience, which learners expect. You hear a lot of people talk about the Netflix of learning, and that's the expectation that our learners have today. They really want that kind of consumerized experience when they're consuming any kind of content, and they don't check their consumer tendencies at the door. And then finally, analytics, which is an incredibly critical part to measure business impact, to take a look at the learning that's happening outside the LMS, and dashboards. So if you're overly relying on your LMS, you might find blind spots with these 4 areas. And these are things that other technologies within your learning tech stack can help to augment your LMS. You don't have to throw your LMS out, but you can augment your LMS with specialty functionalities based on your exact learning strategy. And then the third pitfall to avoid, and I'm sure we can all agree on this, is to avoid what's affectionately known as Excel hell. So if most organizations, if there's a piece of functionality or a process that the LMS can't handle, they have all these manual spreadsheets hanging around that they use to try to do it. And even organizations with very, very large training organizations, large ILTs, I'm always shocked to hear that they're using Excel, which increasingly, of course, it's not scalable, it's not very efficient, and increasingly with this focus on security, GDPR and the like is just not going to be sustainable into the future. So Excel is just not enough. So what is the solution if you're trying to avoid these pitfalls and deal with these types of challenges? So focusing on that base layer, that foundational layer, that training resource management component, let's dive a little bit into what that functionality looks like. So if we take the first word, training, this is a system that's specifically designed with training in mind, with the needs of a training organization. It's not a software system that was designed to do project management or something else. It's really designed with training in mind. It's designed to help you organize with resource management, organize the classrooms, the resources, the administration, the financials, the reporting, and all the logistics. So it's focused around resource management. And then it's a system. So it's an all-in-one unified system, whereas before you might have had various, as we talked about, spreadsheets and manual processes and some other systems. This is a unified system that then integrates with your LMS. And we can do a quick dive into the 6 major feature functionality areas of a TRMS. The first is logistics and resource management, how you organize sessions and assign resources in the most cost-effective way. You might need to, of course, schedule classrooms, but you might need to move very specialized equipment around depending on the audience that you're teaching. Take it out of the field, use it for training, bring it back. You want to be as efficient as possible with that. Course scheduling, how do you find something that works for the instructors, the students, the business as a whole, and be able to make changes to that on the fly, avoiding mistakes and delays. Financials are really important, the financials and cost tracking, so forecasting, budget, and measure profitability, perhaps, of your training, as well as that ROI calculation. Reporting and business intelligence is critical. Being able to extract the information that you need to assess the success of your training activity and make the right decisions in real time. And then for some organizations, training is a profit center, so be able to manage the sales and the profitability of that training and streamlining the whole order to invoice process in a timely and reliable manner. So we're going to walk through one particular case study. Sometimes a case study, a story, will help to kind of paint the picture and see how this could work in your organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. This is an assurance company, a large mutual life company in the US, one of the largest life insurers in the world. And they had your typical multinational L&D department, very large budget, very complex organization, highly regulated environment. They had 12,000 employees with hundreds of courses, multiple training centers that they own and rent and lease, and they had no overall visibility of their ILT program. So they needed all their course info in one place, the dates, the times, the instructors, the participants. They needed it to be managed in one place and uploaded to the LMS. The LMS would surface it, but it wouldn't be able to manage it. So it was very hard for them to proactively create, modify, and optimize a schedule and to really be as nimble as they wanted to be for their business stakeholders. And they had an LMS that was in place, and we're going to talk about the specific solutions that this client used. But they had an LMS, success factors in place, and that was not going anywhere. It was a critical part of their technology stack. So what they decided to do was to augment the LMS with training management and learner experience. So the results are better collaboration between the front office and the back office with tools and integration. They got a global view of their training. They were able to better handle the logistics and conflict resolution, conflict management of their sessions. And as a result, they saw about a 10 to 20% budget cost savings, which is massive for an organization of this size. And it gave them budget to then invest in some new initiatives. And specifically the technologies that were used in this case, SAP SuccessFactors, as I mentioned, is that middleware layer in the middle, Degreed on the front end for the learner experience, and on the back end, Training Orchestra as the scheduling, the logistics, the resource management, budget monitoring, and to feed data, audit, and reporting to and from the LMS. So that is an example of a small learning tech stack, and this organization had other technologies as well. But if you think about that piece, particularly if you have an LMS that you're using that you might be relatively happy with, but it has a few things it doesn't do, or it may be so embedded in your organization, embedded in your ERP or your HRIS system that there's no way you're ever going to be able to get that out of there, well, then you can augment just the way that this organization did to maximize the use of their LMS. So just to summarize, if you're working on your blueprint for a learning tech stack, 3 do's and don'ts. Do focus on your foundation, that foundational layer. Picture that house again. You don't want your house falling into the ocean if you have any kind of issue. Assess your needs. What do you need? There's a lot in these learning tech stacks. You probably don't need everything, but you need to think about the kind of audiences you're delivering to, the kind of content you have, the geography, the language requirements, the currency requirements, all those things. Really, truly assessing your needs and where the gaps in your current technologies are. And then think about your tech stack as a whole. Very few organizations can start with a clean sheet of paper and build a tech stack. You're probably starting with a few foundational pieces of equipment, pieces of technology that are in place, and then you're going to build from there. But think about it as a whole ecosystem. And then don't over-focus on the shiny front end. Of course, it's very important to have an engaging learner experience layer. But if you don't have the supporting foundation below it, your initiative may not be successful. Don't leave measurement for later. You really need to bake in measurement, weave it into the fabric of what you're designing in your learning tech stack. And don't use the wrong tools for the job like Excel and project management software if you have a purpose-built solution. And today, in today's learning tech environment, there are so many purpose-built software solutions that are easily integratable into your tech stack, into your LMS, and that will really help you to build a learning tech stack. So with that, I hope this offered you a blueprint for success of how to build your learning technology stack. Thanks for joining us here at CLO Symposium in Houston.